Welcome to Spark, a podcast for sharing inspirational stories about teaching. This is episode 1, Spark Pilot. We are your hosts, Kathy Goodhart
and Trish Johnson.
And today we're going to share with you the why behind this podcast and 2 inspirational stories from our teaching experiences. Trish, you shared a story recently about a kiddo. Would you mind explaining that a little more and sharing it with our people here?
So, yeah, Kathy, I had this little boy when I was teaching 2nd grade, early on in my teaching career, who was constantly habitually late for school. And we all have that kid who just drives us crazy because now we've got to catch them up. And of course, they're the kid who needs the instruction the most. And I was really kind of banging my head against the wall about what can I do for this kid? I know it was kind of hard on him at first, just saying, hey, buddy, you really need to get here on time. It's really important, and talking to him about the why. He needed to be at school, and of course, it's a 7-year-old. And he's like, okay, Mrs. Johnson, all right. And then he'd show up the next day late. And so I started to look at things a little differently. I started to ask him about his morning. And so the next day, and I also noticed that as I was encouraging him to get there on time, he started to shut down a little bit and not engage with me as much as I would like. And so I started to just ask him about his morning. So the next day he came in and I'd say, so how was your morning? What'd you do this morning? And one day he told me he was playing with Legos. And one day he told me he made himself breakfast. And one day he told me that his mom woke him up and they were rushing out the door. So then I started to notice a bit of a pattern, and I decided to ask him about how he knows when to wake up and how does his mom know when to wake up. And he said, well, we just wake up when we wake up and we just leave when we leave. Something to that effect in 2nd grade speak. And I asked him, well, what if you had an alarm clock that you get to have in your space, your place, just for you to help you wake up? And then when you wake up, you can wake up your mom and see if that can help you. And he's like, yeah, I think that'll work. And so I went out and I bought a cute little boy's alarm clock and I brought it back to school. And I taught him how to set the alarm clock, and I told him what would be a good time. We talked about how long he needed to take to get ready and how long he thought his mom might need. And then also we went over again to make sure that he knew how to tell time, and he did. And sent him home with this alarm clock, and he was so excited. It was really, really cool because it was empowering to him. And then it was empowering to me because it kind of breathed some life into this really stressful, frustrating situation. And I was so excited. I remember the next day just thinking, oh God, don't be disappointed if this doesn't work. And he was the first boy in line outside my classroom door in the morning. This was before we had kids come in. And he was just smiling and he was telling me all about his alarm clock and how excited he was. And it was really cool. And from there on out, he was on time. There was probably 1 or 2 times. He said that sometimes it's hard to wake up his mom, but I was so proud of him. And it was really cool because I taught him how he can be sufficient. He didn't have to lean on somebody else. And so that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that story. I love that it links to empowerment, and it was just cool.
So, Kathy, you were sharing a story with me. Would you share with our group your inspirational story?
Absolutely. I have a great story of a kiddo in middle school. So he was a student of mine fairly recently. And just to give you a little background, he was the quintessential active kid. So imagine the kid that can't sit still, that needs a ball. I had an inner tube, a bicycle inner tube tied around the bottom of his chair so he could bounce. He had gum. He was a drummer, so he was always tapping his pencil. So I'm sure many of us have had those kiddos that just cannot sit still. So as a result of this student's just general physical and activeness, he struggled with friendships. And so he had on and off friendships, but because of his lack of awareness of boundaries, he would play to the point where it would get a little too far and he would hurt somebody. Not intentionally being mean, it was just accidental overabundance of fun. And so as a result of that, he was in the principal's office quite often. And he had this one week where it was just a string of incidents. Poor guy kept going to the principal's office, finding himself in trouble for various reasons. Again, based on the fact that he was just physical and active. And eventually he was grounded over a weekend by his parents. So poor guy had to sit at home, grounded in his room, bored out of his mind. He said, I just did homework all weekend. And by the way, I brought you this thing. And so he hands me this amazing castle of Legos. And it was a desk organizer. And he had built this little drawer so I could put pencils in it. And he said, yeah, I figured since I was at home, bored, grounded, I would at least make you something. So here you go. Thanks. And it was the sweetest thing and just most perfect thing that he could have done because, although he got in trouble, not by me necessarily, it was more those transition times, this castle just kind of symbolized him. He was very creative. And he was, at the end of the day, just a caring kid that had struggles with controlling his emotions, his impulsiveness. So I still have that little Lego castle, and if you walk by my desk someday, I'm sure it'll be there hanging out with pencils. So aside from this student just being a memorable kid in my teaching career, it's a nice reminder for me to treat each kid, each student as an individual, and that they all have their unique characteristics and needs, and that at the end of the day, as teachers, as educators, it's our job to figure out what makes them tick. And that's part of the fun in teaching, I think.
Kathy, that is so true. We all have these stories that become a part of the foundation of who we are as teachers. And we carry these stories with us, and they become even more powerful when we share them. And that is why we decided to create this podcast, not only to share our stories, though, but to also celebrate this great profession of teaching. We hope you're excited about our new podcast and that we've ignited a spark of inspiration to your day.
We'd love for you to share a humorous, innovative, or transformational story from your teaching experience that can continue to spark inspiration. Please share your story. Email Kathy at cgoodhea@jeffco.k12.co.us.